Holly, last week we spoke about the congressional maps that were drawn up and the judge finding that they were inappropriately drafted. This was a 3rd District Court judge who found that the maps, the gerrymandering, we'll call it, maps that were drafted by the Utah legislature were inconsistent with the proposition that the ballot initiative, rather, that the citizens passed in 2018. She's given them time to draft their own maps, and there's apparently a hearing coming up about the second week of October to decide what to do. The legislature was concerned that they weren't given enough time to get that done. She gave them an additional 10 days. It's really not much, but I think that was in part because the lieutenant governor said we could probably set this up if we can get the information by November 10th.
Yeah, that's right. So yesterday they had another hearing where they got that extra time, really, but she won't pause her own ruling, which also sets up the opportunity for the legislative attorneys to take it up to the Utah Supreme Court. But we have an expert on the line with us. It's Senator Todd Weiler. Hi, Senator. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
And I just want to key off what Greg said, because what he said was correct, but I want your listeners to understand. She made no rulings on the maps in place. She didn't find that they were gerrymandered. She didn't find that anyone was harmed by them. What she said was that because the legislature entered into a compromise with the leaders of Prop 4 and passed SB 200 as a compromise bill, that everything after Prop 4 was illegitimate. But I think it's very unusual for her to throw out maps without making any specific findings that those maps are improper.
So where do we go, Todd? I mean, I agree with you that she's not going to submit a map, but is she going to pick something? And who submits the proposals between now and November 10th? Or October, well, I guess I should say.
The legislature is going to be forced to call itself into a special session. And some are suggesting, look, a judge can't order us into special session. And technically she hasn't, but practically she has. And, in 2021, after we had the census data, or 2022, the legislature went on a 6-month listening tour all over the state, had public hearings, I think 18 to 20 public hearings to get input on all these different ideas and maps, and then met in a special session and adopted the maps we have. And even with the extra 10 days, she has made it impossible for us. And remember, she's had this summary judgment brief for 9 months. The Supreme Court ruled 14 months ago. So she took all the time that she wanted, and yet she's truncated the public process of adopting these new maps, which I think is, if this is all about the public, she's basically forced the public out of the process. We don't have 6-month runway. If she would have ruled in January when the summary judgments were briefed, or February or March or April, we could have had 6 months to do this process. But she ruled in late August, and she's refining. In September. Well, she's late August, and she's refining this ruling in early September. So she's forcing now the legislature to cut the public out of the process, and somehow this is supposed to benefit the public. So I'm a little bit confused by that.
Can you can you tell me, if the legislature redraws the maps, is this something where you're going to have an ad hoc committee, or are you going to have a special committee set up? I'm sure you're not going to have all 104 members of the legislature be involved in the map drawing, right?
Well, and that's a great point, because we did have a redistricting committee that was formed, to do that. And like Lyle Hilliard was a co-chair of that, and they're the ones that toured the state. We don't have a committee right now. So will we form a committee for the next 30 or 40 days? Maybe. I think that's going to be up to legislative leadership. The real issue here that people are missing is it's not the maps, but it's the requirements and the standards that were in Prop 4 that are really at issue here, because those standards say you can't divide communities of interest and things like that. Well, and you're supposed to respect municipal boundaries. But when you have 29 counties, when you have 259 cities and towns, it's really hard to equally divide the state into four equal pieces population-wise without dividing some areas. And I'll give you an example. Salt Lake City is 200,000 people, but a congressional district is 850,000 people. So, and then Salt Lake County is over 1.2 million people. So people say, well, Salt Lake County should be its own congressional district. That's impossible. Right. You have to divide Salt Lake County because it's too big to be one congressional district, and Salt Lake City is too small to be one congressional district. I'm just giving you a flavor of the problems here.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Todd. In terms of the special session, I thought we heard when interims were going that there was almost certainly going to be a special session in September anyway. And if that's the case, wouldn't that be the perfect time to address this?
So the idea was the special session, Greg, was going to be like September 16th-ish, and I don't think that's going to give us time. So the question is, do we have two special sessions, the one that we had planned before the ruling and the second one just for the maps, or do we postpone the first special session and just have like a really big special session, to adopt the maps? And so that, I think, is yet to be decided.
So let me ask you this. I am assuming that the state is going to appeal to the Utah Supreme Court, but it also seems like maybe they tipped their hand when they sent it back down. What do you see there with an appeal?
Well, they tipped their hand to the extent on the alter and reform government. They did not tip their hand to any of the remedies, some of which strike legal scholars as ridiculous, that are in this ruling. Now, I know Judge Gibson. I like her. I think she's a very intelligent person, and I don't think she has contempt for the legislature. I think she's doing the very best with the information she has. But I think it wouldn't shock me if the Utah Supreme Court puts a pause on this and lets the next 2 years play out with the maps we have in place, and B, if the Supreme Court reverses some or all of her rulings. And I'll give you one example. She ruled that the language in the state constitution that we've relied on for 130 years that says the legislature has the power to draw the maps is only a timing provision, because right before that it says, within this many days after the census. And so there are things about this ruling that have a lot of people scratching their heads.
It would seem, Todd, that the Supreme Court it would be difficult for them to issue an opinion one way or the other with respect to her opinion, but it would seem, I don't know if likely is the right word, but that they could at least put a stay on this for some period of time.
Now that, we asked for a stay, the legislature's attorneys filed a motion for a stay last Thursday, so almost a week ago. She had a hearing on Friday, did not rule on it, but then she ruled on that yesterday, and so she took the long weekend. So now that she's denied the stay, which is a pause, it's just pressing the pause button for your listeners who are not legally trained. Now that she's denied it, now we can ask the Supreme Court. So we wouldn't ask them to issue a ruling that's going to take them months, of course. We would ask them just to press the pause button and let this play out over the next 2 years. But that would, if they pause it, that means that the current maps that we've relied on in 2022 and 2024 would be in play again for 2026. Congressional elections, and that's what Judge Gibson is trying to avoid.
Yeah, and that's what she actually held, was that those maps were illegal. I don't remember if that's the right word she's indicated.
Well, she's saying they're illegal because Senate Bill 200, which was the compromise bill, that didn't adopt the same standards that the people voted on in 2018. So they're saying, because those drafting requirements and standards weren't followed, she calls it, you're familiar, Greg, with fruit of the poisonous tree with evidentiary and police searches. She's calling this kind of fruit of the poisonous constitutional violation in her ruling. And so she's basically saying everything after that she's invalidating. So she's bringing Prop 4 back into life as the law of the land on redistricting, even though the people who drafted and collected signatures have admitted publicly that there are huge problems legally with Prop 4, one of which is the separation of powers between the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and the legislature, which Judge Gibson said was fine, no big deal. I don't think Matthew Durant, the Chief Justice, is going to. My guess is he's not going to see it the same way she did.
Thanks for joining us. That was Senator Todd Weiler. We'll be right back after the break.